Hi everyone, this is Sarfraz from Aristotle Prep, and we are looking at passage number 12 from the OG13 RC chapter. These are questions 52 to 55 that we are looking at. As always, we will first read the entire passage, I will explain it to you, and then we will try to come up with a purpose for the passage, and then we will approach the questions. The first sentence of the passage is always very important, especially in passages which only have one paragraph like this one does. So the first sentence says, among the myths taken as fact by the environmental managers of most corporations is the belief that environmental regulations affect all competitors in a given industry uniformly. It is very important to note that this is actually a myth. So environmental managers believe that environmental regulations affect all corporations equally, which is a myth. It is not the case. And who's saying this? The author of the passage is saying this. In reality, regulatory costs and therefore compliance fall unevenly, economically disadvantaging some companies and benefiting others. Okay. For example, a plant situated near a number of larger non-compliant competitors is less likely to attract the attention of local regulators than is an isolated plant, and less attention, of course, means lower cost. So it gives you an example when not all plants are equally affected by environmental regulations. Additionally, large plants can spread compliance costs such as waste treatment across a larger revenue base. Okay, it's a benefit to large plants. On the other hand, some smaller plants may not even be subject to certain provisions, such as permit or reporting requirements by virtue of their size. So this is a benefit to small plants. Don't get confused, there's no contrast over here. Additionally, it gives you a benefit enjoyed by large plants, and after the semicolon, on the other hand, it gives you a benefit enjoyed by the smaller plants. Finally, older production technologies often continue to generate toxic wastes that were not regulated when the technology was first adopted. New regulations have imposed extensive compliance costs on companies still using older industrial coal-fired burners that generate high sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide outputs, for example, whereas new facilities generally avoid processes that would create such waste products. By realizing that they have discretion and that not all industries are affected equally by environmental regulation, environmental managers can help their companies to achieve a competitive edge by anticipating regulatory pressure and exploring all possibilities for addressing how changing regulations will affect their companies specifically. So it ends by suggesting how environmental managers can play a more proactive role in helping their companies achieve a competitive edge. So the entire passage is basically about the myth that environmental regulations affect all companies equally. It gives you several examples and instances where companies are not getting affected equally by the same regulation. It also says there are old companies which are still generating toxic waste and paying heavily for it. And then finally, it says environmental environmental managers can play a more proactive role in providing companies with a competitive edge. So, after reading the entire passage, well, it is kind of on. The author definitely has an agenda to drill in the point that environmental regulations don't affect everybody equally, and that environmental managers can play a more proactive role. So he's saying something on those lines. It is not a neutral passage. Having understood the passage in that manner, we will now look at the questions given. The first one, which is question 52, says it can be inferred from the passage that a large plant might have to spend more than a similar but smaller plant on environmental compliance because the larger plant is what? So a larger plant would have to spend more than a smaller plant. So some benefit that a small plant enjoys that the larger one does not enjoy. The only one I recall from the passage is I think somewhere in line number 10 or thereabouts, where it says that a small company does not even attract the attention of line number 14. On the other hand, some smaller plants may not even be subject to certain provisions, such as permit or reporting requirements. So a large plant would be subject to these, a small plant will not be subject to these. I don't recall anywhere else where it has stated anything about a small plant. So the answer definitely has to be from that sentence. In this particular question, you have to be very careful not to use common sense, as you will realize when we look at the options. A, because the larger plant is more likely to attract attention from local regulators. Looks very logical, but nothing in the passage that suggests this. The passage never says that the larger plant will attract more attention. If you're talking about line number 6 onward, the for example part, it says a plant situated near a lot of larger plants. So this plant is actually smaller than the larger plants, will attract less attention. So A, while it looks logical, is not supported by the passage. B says a larger plant is less likely to be exempt from permit and reporting requirements should be the answer from the lines I just showed you. Smaller plants are exempted from these requirements. The larger one may not be, or most likely will not be. So B should be the answer. C says larger plant is less likely to have regulatory costs passed on to it by companies and nonsense. Absolutely out of scope. D says larger plant is more likely to employ older technologies. Why is it more likely to employ older technology? Nothing in the passage that suggests that. Because the larger plant is more likely to generate waste that are more environmental damaging. Again, nothing in the passage that says that. So the answer to the question should be B. It is not a very straight question. It's a tricky question. A lot of the students, I'm sure, on this particular question are going with A. But A, I hope you've understood why it is wrong. Because it's logical but not supported at all by the passage. And B is actually, in an oblique manner, inferred or supported by the passage.